June 18, 1815. On a field of mud and blood, Europe's most feared army is no longer an army. It's a terrified mob fleeing into the twilight. In the chaos, a single carriage carries a man who, hours before, held the fate of a continent in his hands, Napoleon Bonaparte. He had been on the razor's edge of a brilliant victory, but in the final moments, a single decision turned triumph into a disaster that ended his empire. What was that mistake? To understand how it all went so wrong, you have to understand Napoleon's impossible gamble. After escaping exile, he returned to a hero's welcome in France. But the powers of Europe declared him an outlaw and gathered their armies to crush him. Napoleon's only hope was to strike first. He planned to hit the Allied armies in Belgium, led by the Duke of Wellington and the Prussian Field Marshal Blucher, before they could unite. His classic strategy was to divide and conquer, and at first, it was working. On June 16th, 2 days before Waterloo, Napoleon defeated the Prussians at the Battle of Ligny, sending them into retreat. Or so he thought. Meanwhile, his top commander, Marshal Ney, fought Wellington to a standstill at Quatre Bras, preventing the British from aiding the Prussians. Convinced his plan was working, Napoleon made a critical calculation. He detached a third of his army, over 30,000 men under Marshal Grouchy, with simple orders: pursue the Prussians and stop them from rejoining Wellington. Napoleon then turned his attention to the British army. Wellington had pulled his forces back to a defensive ridge near a village called Waterloo. On the morning of June 18th, Napoleon was supremely confident, boasting he'd win by lunchtime. But a massive thunderstorm the night before had turned the field into a swamp. Knowing his cannons would be ineffective in the mud, he delayed his attack from early morning until 11:30 a.m. This delay was fateful. Every passing hour gave the battered Prussians time to regroup and march to Wellington's aid. When the battle began, it was a brutal, grinding fight. Napoleon opened with a huge artillery bombardment, followed by a diversionary attack on the chateau of Hougoumont. The goal was to trick Wellington into weakening his centre, but Wellington didn't fall for it, and the chateau became a bloody stalemate that fruitlessly consumed French troops. Around 1:30 p.m., the main French infantry attack began. It pushed back the first Allied line, but was then shattered by volleys from hidden British infantry and a devastating cavalry counterattack. Then, in the mid-afternoon, came a blunder from Marshal Ney. Mistaking the movement of wounded soldiers for a retreat, he ordered a massive, unsupported cavalry charge. For nearly 2 hours, wave after wave of France's finest horsemen hurled themselves against the unbreakable Allied infantry squares. It was a glorious, breathtaking, and catastrophic waste of France's best cavalry. These compounding errors, the delayed start, the costly distraction at Hougoumont, and Ney's squandered cavalry, were already pushing Napoleon's army to its breaking point. But the Emperor was a gambler, and he still had one last card to play. Before we get to that final fateful decision, if you're enjoying untangling history's greatest turning points, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss our next story. By 6:00 p.m. the situation was desperate. Ney's infantry captured the key farmhouse of La Haye-Sainte, exposing Wellington's centre, but Napoleon had no fresh infantry to exploit the gap. Worse, the news they dreaded arrived. Prussians were on their right flank. Field Marshal Blucher was attacking, threatening to collapse Napoleon's entire position. Trapped and exhausted, Napoleon rejected retreat and chose to attack. He would stake everything on one final roll of the dice, his last reserve, the legendary Imperial Guard. These veteran immortals had a reputation for invincibility. Around 7:30 p.m., Napoleon committed them, sending a lie down the line that reinforcements had arrived. The Guard advanced in dense columns, an iron tide aimed at Wellington's line. This was the all-or-nothing gamble. This was the mistake. But Wellington was ready, thanks to a last-minute defector. He had his best troops, the British foot guards, lie down on the reverse slope of the ridge, hidden from view. As the French column crested the ridge, Wellington ordered, "Now, Maitland, now's your time." Over 1,500 British guardsmen stood and unleashed a devastating point-blank volley. The Imperial Guard, men famous for never breaking, faltered. A second volley and a British bayonet charge sealed their fate. Then the unthinkable happened. The Imperial Guard broke. For the first time in their history, they began to fall back. A cry of horror spread through the French ranks. "La Garde recule!" The Guard is retreating. That moment shattered the army's morale. If the Guard could break, all was lost. Panic turned into a full-blown rout as the Prussians collapsed the French flank. Soldiers threw down their weapons and ran. Seeing the chaos, Wellington signaled a general advance. The battle was over. So was it really one mistake? In truth, Waterloo was a cascade of errors. The delayed start, trusting Grouchy, and Ney's reckless charges. But the final fatal mistake was Napoleon's. Sending in his Imperial Guard when his army was already on the verge of collapse was the point of no return. It was an act of pure desperation, a bet against time he was doomed to lose. The defeat led to Napoleon's final exile to St. Helena. The battle redrew the map of Europe, ending 2 decades of constant war. An empire built by one man's genius was ultimately undone by his own final, catastrophic gamble. What do you think was Napoleon's biggest mistake? Was it trusting Grouchy, the delayed start, or his final roll of the dice with the Guard? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to see more analyses of history's greatest turning points, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. Thanks for watching.